Well, it's actually funny. We found out recently from a source that Jolo is living in Wuhan. That was a rumor because the police chief in Malaysia said that a few weeks ago, and we just thought that was some nonsense coming out of Malaysia. But it turns out Jolo, who is the main character in our book $1 Billion Whale, who's one of the biggest fraudsters in history and is still on the run, was living in Wuhan, and he had some sort of relatives there. This information is 6 months old, so it's possible that he's no longer there. But anyway, he's protected by China because he was involved in lots of corrupt Belt and Road deals involving the Chinese government. His protector in China, a guy called Sun Lijun, is now under investigation for corruption, according to a Wall Street Journal story from a few weeks ago. So we don't know exactly where he is, but we assume he's in China. As for Malaysia, that's a pretty strange situation now. Najib Razak, the former prime minister who was Jolo's protector and helped steal a lot of money from the Malaysian treasury, he is not back in power. He's still arrested and out on bail awaiting trial, or his trial is ongoing. But I don't expect it to move along very quickly because of the change of government in Malaysia, which has brought back some people who are close to Najib and Najib's political party, closer to the center of power. And so we'll have to wait to see how that plays out, but definitely don't expect a verdict in the Malaysian trials anytime soon. I think democracies were already in retreat before the virus became an issue, and we've seen that that's becoming a worse problem now. I mean, from Viktor Orban in Hungary, who's given himself emergency powers, the Philippines, where there's a new fake law decree, journalists are getting arrested from Turkey to Thailand if they question governments' reactions to COVID. China itself obviously suppressed information about the disease back in December, and that was a calamity for the global health system. And we don't see we have no reason to believe that China is going to open up. They're not allowing international inspections of what's going on in China. I'm very negative about the future of liberty in many countries. Even in America, Donald Trump said that at the beginning of all this, said that the virus was a hoax. So lots of misinformation, lots of attempts by governments to clamp down on their citizenship. And then a bigger question is what will happen to the surveillance state after this? After September 11th, there was a lot of moves to sort of restrict movement across borders, to spy on people. And will that happen in the wake of this? Will governments use the need, what they will say will be the need to surveil people, to clamp down on their populations and the movements of their populations? There's no reason to think that the protests won't come back in a big way. I mean, there obviously was a hiatus for the virus. People didn't want to go out in the streets. They were nervous about that. But on Mother's Day, we saw the police arrest over 200 people in shopping malls in Hong Kong, and pepper spraying journalists and that kind of thing. The problem here is that the Chinese government, or maybe we should say the Hong Kong government, it seems ready for a battle. I mean, they're arresting pro-democracy leaders like Jimmy Lai. They are pushing ahead with laws, or they're trying to push through laws through the Legislative Council to criminalize anyone who would boo during the Chinese national anthem. Those kinds of actions are just going to further stir the pot, and I think we're going to see a lot more protests in Hong Kong in the months and weeks ahead. China and the US are interdependent. They need each other. The US needs to sell its manufacturers into China and vice versa. They had a deal back in January for China to buy $200 billion worth of US manufacturers and farm goods. Obviously, there's a big problem now because from the demand side, China contracted in the first quarter by over 6%. It's going to grow by 1 or 2% this year. It just isn't the demand. And then from the US side, there's a supply issue. They just can't get the goods out, like automobile plants are not running at full capacity, that kind of thing. I was reading the media this morning out of the US, and there's some talk, Tito Navarro says China has to pay for unleashing this virus on the world. But I don't think there's any signs yet that this trade deal is dead because, as I said, both sides need each other. I mean, I've heard people say that it's going to help globalization, that there's going to be more international cooperation. I don't subscribe to that at all. I think the WHO has done a fairly poor job in all of this. Information has been passed around very badly. People don't really know what's going on. I'd say that if anything, what it's done is it has exposed this inequality issue that everyone has been talking about for years. You know, the people who have the service jobs, who've lost their jobs overnight, people who don't have health insurance, the vulnerable in societies all across the world. You know, the Indian migrants who had to leave Delhi or Mumbai to go home. And yeah, those kind of issues have come to the fore. And I think there's going to be a reckoning in the years ahead, if not the months ahead, about how do you make a sort of more fair society where, you know, when there is a global pandemic, how do you protect everyone in your society? But at this moment, I don't see any reason to be optimistic about that. I think there's just a lot of bickering. You can see it on social media. And the politicians just don't seem to be stepping up with grand solutions for this. It's going to be very difficult. But yeah, no real reasons for optimism at this stage.